Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting. Whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or by connecting through our Facebook page. From time to time, I like to read stories of NDEs and other spiritually transformative experiences, both from the files of IANDS and also from those sent to me from listeners to NDE Radio. Today's show begins with one recent letter I received and concludes with a report from IANDS as well. For those experiencers who would like to submit their own stories, I'll give you an email address at the end of the show where you can send them in. In her letter to us, Wendy wrote, "My first NDE happened when I was 5 while getting my tonsils removed. That event caused me to open to spiritual paths outside the teaching of the conservative church school my family attended. Nevertheless, the severe trauma I experienced in my early childhood due to other events caused me to grow in a state of complex PTSD that took the form of suicidal ideation and actions for most of my life. Even on the best days, I just didn't want to be on Earth. I knew what it was like to be on the other side, and that was where I wanted to be. This world was just too difficult and had too much pain. Every single morning I woke up depressed that I had not died the night before, but I kept going through the motions of living, even though I felt there was no purpose to any of it. Then COVID came along. My father passed away due to unrelated issues, and I felt like the few people who remained in my life didn't actually need me here and might be better off without me and my cloud of depression hanging over them. So when in December I contracted COVID, I found myself secretly hoping it would kill me, and it did. Because I live with an older lady who also came down with COVID at the same time, I justified my choice to not go to the hospital. Her symptoms were very mild, but she still needed a bed rest. We also have 2 dogs who needed to be cared for, so I told myself that was another excuse to get only urgent care and turn down the hospital trip that they offered me, as my COPD was a high-risk factor. They made me promise to go to the ER if my O2 dropped under 90, and stayed there for more than an hour. It was a promise I did not intend to keep. I knew my lungs could not handle the disease brewing inside of me, as I had already been fighting a bronchitis flare the previous 3 weeks. This was my passage out. I could leave this wretched world in all my pain without lifting a finger against myself, so it could not scar my friends or family. The first 2 days on my cot were spent sleeping and waking only to take care of the dogs. My O2 levels were staying around 90, but my body was not fighting. The 3rd day, everything collapsed. My body did not run a fever at all. Now my temperature dropped to 95, and my O2 levels dropped to the 70s. My blood pressure was so low, it was erroring out my monitor. I knew the time had come to go, and I was not afraid. I was just in pain and exhausted. I knew my friend would check on me in a few hours, and I knew she would have it hard, but I knew she would be okay. I could not turn back now, as I was too weak to do anything to help myself, even if I wanted to. My dogs both climbed on top of me in an instinctive way, trying to warm me as I felt myself surrender to the monstrous virus I had allowed to win. The coldness inside my body became a solid encasement. And then I was free. The warmth that was my consciousness escaped like water vapor and rose up. I saw the COVID virus inside the body and felt instant compassion for it. I understood it was as alive and fighting for survival and growth as myself. It was so different from who I was in that body. I felt ashamed of myself for undervaluing physical life the way I had, but I also forgave myself for it. In an instant, I felt understood by the one who created both the virus and me. I felt forgiven for my lack of appreciation toward the gift of life, and I felt the need to forgive everyone else. I had told Creator I could not forgive others on my own. Those words were presented back to me in auditory knowing. And then I heard Creator tell me that in order for me to receive the forgiveness it was offering me, I first had to allow myself to forgive everyone else. I asked how I was to do that. Creator said, just let go of the debt. I got it. I didn't have to do or give others anything. All I had to do was stop asking them for repayment. It was that simple. Toss out my You Owe Me book. Instantaneously, I felt everything balanced for my soul. I had forgiven all and had been instantly forgiven of all. The joy I felt with Source at this point was beyond words. Perfect unity, perfect understanding, and perfect acceptance of all that Creator is was my reality in heaven. For an eternity that is still present, everything was crystal clear in beauty and dance. I saw evil as simple forgetfulness of truth. I saw the gift of consciousness as the ultimate show of love. And I knew the greatest miracle was for Source to even pick a me out of the infinite creation and let me keep an identity and ego when I was nothing at all. Then it was time to make a choice. Source said I could stay. I said yes, but Source said I first had to experience what my passing would be like for someone who loved me. I was then placed into the awareness of my mom. I felt her heart crush upon hearing of my death. I felt so many emotions of sorrow and pain. She had just lost her husband a few months prior, and this was too much. I felt her heart grieving in anguish. I could not take it anymore. Okay, I will go back. I woke up and my dogs were licking my face. I checked my O2 and it was up to 80, but I was still very sick. I managed to take care of the dogs and my friend before going back to my cot, and when I fell asleep, I left my body again. Once again, Source told me I had a choice to stay or return. I was then allowed to experience the impact of my death on another family member, and I decided to return for that person. This cycle of dying, being shown or experiencing a response to my death, and choosing to return to life continued for several hours. The next day, I woke up a different person. The virus was subsiding, but I did get more medicine from my doctor, called it in, and I had to force myself to eat and drink as I was sicker than I had ever been in my life, but I was now determined to live. Since that NDE, I have been gifted the ability to maintain a heart of total forgiveness. Even when a stranger banged into my car while I was sitting in it, I immediately forgave him. There's no more debt book for anyone. I can't explain it any other way. It isn't that things don't bother me. It's just a state of being that I did not have before. Finally, my lifelong obsession with suicide ended. Now, this is a PS to my NDE experience with COVID. It's not something I would go around shouting from the rooftop, and I understand that many people might either rationalize this away, thinking I was making it up, or just a few cards short of a full deck. But this is what happened a few months afterward. The x-rays of my lungs showed straight-line scars where they had collapsed during my illness. This was in addition to the spiderweb of scars giving my x-ray a shattered glass appearance. My oxygen level had come up to an average of about 92 on good days. Most days it dipped into the mid-80s. Even though I am a non-smoker, the doctor reconfirmed my diagnosis of COPD with chronic bronchitis being worsened by COVID scarring. The 92 oxygen was obtained when I was using my breathing treatments. I was told that I might need to go onto an oxygen tank if I had any additional scarring or issues as I aged. I am only 54. But the NDE had given me a peace beyond doctors' prognosis. I knew everything was perfect in the oneness of time and space. It would not be fun to go through the remaining years of my life with my breathing so hindered. It caused me to feel as though I was drowning out of the water with every breath. But I knew life now as a precious gift from God, and that made everything okay. No matter what, it was all okay. One day when my oxygen was 88, I felt well enough to hit the grocery store. The sun was shining and God's perfect creation was all around me. This act of enjoying being alive was still brand new to me. I was high on life. While inside the store's produce section, I noticed a beautiful Native American woman walking in. First of all, she didn't push a buggy or have a basket. Secondly, she was wearing a tribal dress of white leather with splendid and simple beading. I've spent most of my life walking the red road due to my own spiritual path and lineage, so I immediately understood the honorable way she was dressed. Normally, I do not approach strangers, but I felt pulled to greet her. But I was a few sections away from the door, so I was not able to approach her. She went into the bread aisle, one section over. I made a mental note about how splendid her outfit was and how no one made them that way anymore. But I also thought it was odd that she was alone. Someone dressed in formal leathers such as that would be accompanied by family. Odd. I finished gathering my salad fixings and almost forgot about her. And then I headed into the bread aisle. There she was, midway down, walking right toward me. It felt like time slowed. I could see the details of her leather dress. I could see she was guarding something close to her chest with her left hand, a small book. And I felt a sensation of being in the presence of someone who knew Jesus personally. I looked into her face and saw the countenance was one of a young woman about 20. It radiated purity and humility simultaneously. I wanted to say, "Hello, grandmother," because I saw her hair was like the finest spun sterling silver. But that was wrong. She wore her hair in two long braids on either side. So I knew she had not married. "Hello, sister," I said, barely about a reverential whisper as our paths crossed. She lifted her eyes for the briefest second, and her face flashed a tender and loving smile in reply. There was no way to describe what happened throughout my spirit, soul, and body in that eternal instant. I stopped and turned around with a desire to thank her for something I had yet to understand, but she was gone. I almost ran to the end of the aisle. She was not there. I dashed outside and looked around, but she was not there either. It was in that moment I knew I had just encountered a spiritual being, but I had no name for who she was. Finished with the shopping, I returned home and relayed the experience to my partner. Without missing a beat, she said, "You were visited by the blessed Saint Kateri." I, being raised Baptist, had no idea who she was talking about, so I had to do a bit of research. Then I realized my breathing had become much lighter and easier. I rushed into the bathroom to check my oxygen level. It was 98. My doctors can't explain it. They said the body can often find ways to heal on its own. But in one day, within a few hours? No, this had nothing to do with me. I did not deserve it. I did not earn it. It was another precious gift that the Creator gave me. And the writer closes her letter with this happy observation. Oh, and my oxygen has stayed up since then. Signed, Wendy. As a former editor of IANDS quarterly publication Vital Signs, I consider past issues an important resource for reports of NDEs as written by the experiencers themselves. The following anonymous example comes from the fall 1993 issue. The experiencer writes, "In 1968, I was employed by a plastics plant. At the time, my duties were largely focused on a particular machine. My employer had purchased it several months earlier, and we had been occupied with redesign and rebuilding. On this morning, the machine was being heated up for a trial run. It was placed in a remote area, and the nearest people were some distance away. I entered this area alone for a final temperature check. One of the zones was erratic. I came to a decision to use the simple troubleshooting technique of switching thermocouples. A problem can be quickly localized as either heater, sensor, or controller. In those days, many workmen prided themselves on their ability to think and act alone. With no thought for safety, I got the ladder and climbed to the main die several feet above the floor. Concentration was total, without a wavering of thought. I braced myself with my left hand and reached with my right to unscrew the suspect thermocouple. Since its bulb is in a bore, it is integral to the machine frame with a perfect ground. Unknown to me, my left hand was in contact with an uninsulated spot on a heater conductor. Touching the thermocouple sent a moderately high voltage into one hand and out the other. There was a burst of light that could only be described as many shooting stars, various in direction and color. The only sound was a loud 60-cycle buzzing. Several thoughts came to my mind at once as one. I was aware of the instinctive ability of the body to reverse muscular motions and break free at a speed far greater than conscious thought. At the same time, I knew the body was totally immobilized. There was simply no time for a final thought for loved ones or a prayer to the infinite. The buzzing was annoying, but there was no pain. There was no fear. Terror is relative. It is always accompanied by the desire for relief, for escape. There's always another day, hour, or minute. Fear does not exist when fate rules supreme. This is how I lost consciousness. I would guess less than a second elapsed. My body collapsed and tumbled to the floor, breaking the electric connection. I was immediately ushered into a strange new world. It seemed that I looked about by directing my attention, not moving my eyes. I was in a glen. All about was a profusion of trees, bushes, and flowers. I saw no great light. All seemed self-luminous. There were no shadows. The underside of leaves was as bright as the upper. It was utterly quiet and still. There was no buzzing bees or darting birds. It seemed only a pattern of nature, a lifeless model, but it was a perfectly lovely pattern. I saw no seeds lying on the grass or fruit, at least not within the span of my attention. No budding flowers were seen. Each was fully mature, the petals radiant with unearthly colors. There was no birth, death, or growth, no time or motion. I did not think, I saw. I knew. I did not marvel at the strangeness. All seemed perfectly correct. There was no sense of monocular images. Things seemed quite solid, yet they were twisted as I recalled them. They had more than depth, more than 3 dimensions. The absence of time became part of this form. I then became aware of lying prone. My head rested on the lap of another being. I sensed femininity. Rather than seeing any part of her nature, my forehead felt caressed ever so gently. She was singing a lullaby. I absorbed every word and felt a great peace. Sadly, her song was in another tongue, just as the strange shapes and colors. It was but dimly recalled. I could have brought a great carol into the world. I could only think of a cosmic mother comforting a cosmic child. I wished to look upon the face of this angel. What was I to see? Ethereal beauty? A face distorted by the strange geometry of this odd world? As I raised my attention, the entire other world vanished in an instant. I was back in physical consciousness, lying on the plant floor. I cried out, and help came. From the size of the pool of blood, my heart had resumed pumping about 3 minutes before awakening. I was rushed off to the hospital. Vital signs were good. The wound was stitched up and bruises thought minor. I could have gone home, but I chose to return to the plant. But I just sat and moped, too mystified to function. I went home and slept long. I returned to work the following morning. I felt refreshed and exuberant and fell into my routines as though they had never been interrupted. Life was satisfying, and I had no thought of change. I continued to enjoy my marriage and my work. Memory of the accident faded like a scratched fender in a traffic mishap. But soon a number of changes intruded into my settled life. I astonished myself by requesting a divorce. I left my comfortable position and made a radical change in my career. Both minor and major changes have come unbidden, one after another, ever since. Without being conscious of the fact, for many years I was rebelling against settled thinking and living. It is perhaps worthy of note that I never developed a fear of electricity. Instead, I became imbued with fascination. I began to study industrial control on my own. I became increasingly aware that the machines and processes I was involved with were poorly controlled. I gloried in putting a concept into logic symbols. Employers liked many of my concepts, and panels were built. I usually had little time for the actual wiring, but I wanted to be involved. If a panel was portable, I would take it home to the kitchen table and wire it in the evenings. Freed from time and budget considerations, I developed elaborate schemes. Components were placed according to the logic concept, and all subcircuits were of identifying color. I had all the time in the world, and the completed work gave an added bonus. Subordinates could almost see the logic. More than this, my ego saw a work of art. Once I took out a faulty breaker from live bus bars, I simply made up specifically insulated tools and took it out. I was thought foolhardy, but acted without a trace of anxiety. I have a friend who will not pick up his wife's toaster until she unplugs it, and I shake my head in disbelief. Needless to say, my fearlessness pertained to things of the outer world. There was always a measure of self-doubt that brought a degree of trepidation. I was somewhat insecure in personal areas and in unfamiliar matters, but I pushed myself hard in the outer world. Every accomplishment only brought a somewhat irrational pull to further challenges, and in moments of leisure, I would reflect on the strange experience. And there the experiencer ends. My thanks once again to Wendy for sharing her remarkable story, and my thanks again to IANDS and to Vital Signs for the shock victim story. If you'd like to submit a description of your own near-death experience for me to read, please email it to us at contactnderadio@gmail.com. That's contactnderadio, one word, @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And to listen to this show again or any of our more than 500 archived ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone, for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying once again, thanks for listening.